The four of them went on a week-long trip to Corfu. By four, I mean my wife Kirsty and her three best friends from school, Laura, Jane, and Shona. They were inseparable and tried to spend a couple of short weekend breaks together every year. I didn't mind because in return, I got a couple of weekends of golf. The week-long trip was unusual, but the package was last minute and cheaper than some of their weekend trips. With short notice of rest time, they would fly out on Monday and return the following Sunday. This left me, Mark, in charge of our 15-year-old son, Jake, and 8-year-old Chloe. Not to say I can't cook, but Kirsty left pre-prepared meals for the week, so that God forbid I poison the children. The week started well, thanks to the help of both sets of parents. I managed to work, run to school, attend sports and dance clubs. I was getting pretty good at being a domestic goddess, thanks in part to Kirsty's instructions for the washing machine. Kirsty called several times, mainly to check that I had not done any permanent damage, but also to remind the children that she missed them and loved us all. So we made it through the week, and I was with John and Tony, Shauna and Jane's husbands, waiting for the girls at the airport. Laura was still single. The kids stayed home, engrossed in their devices, and I was at the stage where I trusted Jake to look after Chloe for a short time. I saw Sean and Jane trudge through the arrivals hall, looking tired, followed soon after by Laura, but there was no sign of Kirsty. The other girls' greetings seemed a little hesitant while I was still looking for her. Laura asked if I had received any letters from Kirsty. I had no idea what she was talking about. The girls looked at each other warily when Laura said that Kirsty had sent a letter which I was supposed to read, which explained why Kirsty hadn't come home. I immediately thought she must have been sick or had an accident and asked if she was okay. I was assured that she was fine, but that she had decided to stay with friends for a couple of days. I never received any clear answers to my subsequent barrage of questions. I left the airport feeling both anxious and humiliated. When I got home, I eagerly turned on my computer, and it turned out that an email had arrived just after I left for the airport. It was no more than what Laura said. Just because she met with friends, she had the opportunity to take a short boat trip, and she stayed a few days to do it. I hoped that everything was fine with us, and that the children had gotten used to my cooking, and at the end I wrote that she loved us and would return home soon. I couldn't understand why she hadn't called and mentioned the extra stay, and then I realized she hadn't called at all for the last couple of days. And what kind of friends are they? I couldn't figure out who it could be. I called her on her cell phone, but the call went to voicemail, so my message was short and sweet. Try to pick up the phone. Perhaps she is on a voyage where there is no connection, but I had a very uneasy feeling. I tried calling again, but there was still no answer. Then I started calling 3 of her friends. They had to know something. Shauna's husband, John, said that I should come to their house at 9 o'clock in the evening. When I arrived, all the other girls and Tony were there, and the situation seemed tense. John started the conversation. "Mark needs to know what happened. Come on, Shauna." "Last night we met a few guys at a pool party in the harbor and went to their house for drinks. It was a simple party." Kirsty started talking to the owner of the house, a guy named Samuel. Tony interrupted. "According to the version Jane told me, there was more to it. Kissing and cuddling, they were all having a great time on some rich bastard's yacht." Shona looked at Jane, but Laura spoke up. "It wasn't like that. A couple of guys tried to hit on us, but we brushed them off, and when they got too pushy, we left. Well, we left, but Kirsty stayed." "Crap," I said, although I didn't realize it. "I tried to convince her to come with us, but she was determined to stay." Shauna chimed in. "They didn't do anything, Mark. They just talked." "I guess she didn't come back to the room with you." Silence told me the answer. "She came back at lunchtime today and announced that she was staying for a few days, took her things, and left. We all screamed and yelled at her, but she was determined to leave. We don't understand what happened to her, but we didn't try to dissuade her. So she stayed there with some millionaire." "I guess so," was the most helpful answer I received. More things were said, but we kept going in circles. The guys were furious. While I was in complete disbelief, it was so they don't like it at her, which just didn't make sense. I returned home on autopilot, dealt with the kids, and collapsed into bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. My world collapsed. The next morning, I woke up late and rushed around the house frantically, trying to get the kids ready, make lunches, and get them both to school. Being late for work, I missed the start of a meeting with a client, much to the displeasure of my manager. Still, nothing was heard from Kirsty. There had been a rush at work all day, and I was late picking Chloe up. Luckily, Shauna, Jane, and their children were with her in the schoolyard. They saw how excited I was and offered to help for the rest of the week. They asked about Kirsty's letter, and I told them how little was written there. I was still completely in the dark. On Monday evening, Kirsty finally called me and apologized for not calling, saying she had no signal. Without taking a breath, she talked about the opportunity to go on a sea voyage with friends and how this opportunity was too good to pass up. I let her continue and then said, "So, will you stay with Samuel on his yacht?" The silence was deafening. "Mark, it's not what you think. I think you live with a millionaire, you left your husband, you humiliated me in front of our friends, and you don't have the decency to keep in touch with your children. It's just a few days. I'll be back on Thursday. Don't worry about returning at all." I hung up. What kind of complete bitch is this? The phone rang several times, but I ignored it. Received SMS. "Sorry, the first flight is tomorrow at 15 hours. We need to talk. Tell the children I love them." My anger reached new heights of "we need to talk" and "tell the kids I love them" after she ignored them. She has to be kidding. The next day, I asked her parents to look after the children. They were shocked by her action, but asked me to listen to her version before deciding anything. The children also started asking questions. I wasn't going to pick her up, so she dragged her suitcase through the door at 8 o'clock in the evening. I said nothing and looked at her silently. "Sorry, Mark, I didn't think so. It was an opportunity to take a break from everything, and I took advantage of it. I just didn't think about what it would look like. You probably think I'm an idiot. You stayed on his yacht, although the others begged you to return to the hotel with them. He was nice. We were just talking." Fuck off, Kirsty. You don't abandon your family for a simple conversation with someone nice. For 3 days, you were just talking? Basically, yes, but I didn't have sex with him. I don't believe you, and even if I didn't, you still left me for another man. I didn't leave you. I just had the opportunity to travel freely, and there were other people there. Samuel is a true gentleman, a truly generous host, and a good listener. So, I'm not listening to you. No, that's not the point. You're listening, but this is a kind of escape from our ordinary life, as if I can choose anything and be free. Our life is a little stagnant, a little, well, boring. You're probably kidding. This is the life you wanted. Children and a home. It's because of you that we stopped traveling and gave up most of our activities. It was you who wanted a bigger house and to save money. The children were too young to travel. There was no way to take time off from work. There was always some excuse. Is it really that? Or is it that you had a chance to have sex with a millionaire? I don't know, Mark. I just felt different there. We got along so well, and I think we developed a connection. I have simply no words. Have you fallen in love with him, or is it just lust? Damn it. I didn't have sex with him. I noticed the wording of her comment. Didn't have sex with him, but slept with him, I guess. Finally, she nodded with tears in her eyes. How charming. And you kissed and caressed. Another nod and more tears. I had to leave before my head exploded. You need to see the children. They are with their mother. I hope you can better explain to them what you are up to before I do. I ran out, hearing Kirsty calling out to me behind me. I was in the pub for an hour before Tony found me. He brought himself a beer and sat down next to him. "Sorry, buddy, there's a whole hunt going on for you," Kirsty called Laura, "and they're looking for you." He made a couple of calls to say he had found me. John arrived shortly after. If it's any consolation, the girls are furious with her too. Her actions left them in the shitter. We are unhappy with our wives and still ask questions and compare answers to see if there is something more to it. I asked if there was anything new, but they thought not. What will you do? I have no idea. She seems to be in love with this asshole and lost in some kind of romantic fantasy. At that moment, my phone rang. Please come home. We need to talk. No, like you before. I don't want to go back, I answered. It rang again and I turned it off. Kirsty. It was past midnight when Tony helped Mark back into the house. I've never seen him so drunk. I tried to help, but Mark looked at me with absolute contempt. Tony managed to get him into bed and he fell asleep immediately. I had just begun to thank Tony for his help when he interrupted me. What are you doing with him, Kirsty? It's bad enough that you didn't come back, but now he thinks you're in love with some guy. He deserves better. This is just cruel. Figure out what you want and stop tormenting him with your other boyfriend. With these words, Tony ran away. I looked at Mark and was very upset. Tony is right, he doesn't deserve this. I'm selfish. He barely moved while I undressed him and put him to bed, leaving a basin, a glass of water, and 2 aspirin nearby. I was so confused. Mark is such a good man and a great father, and I hurt him. I still love him and cannot explain my actions with Samuel. Maybe because Samuel only looked at me and talked to me, and not to Kirsty, his wife or mother, he made me feel special. Anyway, I need to forget about all this and become a good wife and mother again. At this moment, I received an SMS. Are you okay? It was from Samuel and I ignored it. The truth was that I was far from okay. I hurt the people I love. Besides Mark, I have to make it up to Jake and Chloe. They knew something was wrong. Then, in front of my friends, whom I put in an awkward situation, the looks of disappointment I received from Mom and Dad when I went to pick up the kids were devastating. The next morning, I tried to talk to Mark, but he wasn't interested and seemed annoyed that I saw him drunk. His only words were, "Don't worry, this won't happen again." He went to work, looking shabby, and I started getting the kids ready for school. This was the beginning of trying to return to normal life. Over the next few days, I kept getting more text messages from Samuel, worrying me and asking if I was okay. I resisted the urge to answer them. Days passed, and I still couldn't get through to Mark. We talked only about business, and for the sake of the children, we tried to maintain a pleasant facade, but everything was terrible. I started to cry again when the phone rang. I answered without looking. It was Samuel. When he heard how things were and how upset I was, I could barely stop him from coming for me. I repeated the conversation that had taken place the day I returned, about how much I loved my husband and children, and that I should return to them. Then I explained all the pain we had caused them. He said he was lonely and that he missed me. I felt the same way, even though I live in a house full of people. He asked if he could see me to make sure I was okay. I refused, but he continued to insist, saying that he would book a local hotel and begged me to meet. Samuel kept texting and calling, and eventually, while the kids were at school and Mark was at work, I went to his place for lunch. He hadn't changed and was still worried about me. It was a relief to have someone I could talk to. We chatted casually, and for the first time in weeks I felt better. I agreed to meet him next week. The more Mark moved away, the closer Samuel became. He was so caring and apologized for the problems he caused me. I was so pleased to see him. He felt like my only friend. At the 4th dinner, I went to his hotel room and we made love for the first time. I was overwhelmed with emotions. This feeling was amazing. Not that Samuel was better than Mark, but it was new and exciting. Plus, I hadn't had sex since I went on vacation, which made the sensation even worse. Samuel was delighted and called it an honor to be with me. After that, we hugged and made love again, but not like with Mark. I felt free and could open up. She returned home late and found Mark sleeping on a blanket in Chloe's room. They both fell asleep as he read her a bedtime story. I felt absolutely terrible. I carefully woke him up and put him in my bed, but he quickly fell asleep again. I crawled under the covers next to him and cried until I fell asleep. I wanted to take care of Mark so much, but I thought I was falling in love with Samuel. It was all so confusing and I found myself in the most terrible dilemma. I tried to think about what would be best for Mark. If I really love him, wouldn't it be better to just leave? Am I trying to protect Mark or am I just being a coward? I missed the opportunity to ask him for advice. He always knows how to do the right thing. I arranged to meet Samuel again, this time for dinner, and wanted to make it special. My mom had the kids, and Mark was away with the kids for a sleepover. I found my little black dress, stiletto heels, and bought new stockings. The dinner was wonderful, and we talked about elopement and possible divorce. He has money, so it's not a problem, and he can help with the lawyers about custody. When I said I couldn't leave because of the kids and school, he immediately suggested we find a place nearby so we could be together. The sex was amazing. Samuel was not trying to quickly remove my dress. He liked my underwear and stockings. It was an absolute escape from my normal and now depressing life. I returned home at midnight and was horrified to see Mark's car at the entrance. When she came in, he was holding a stocking bag in his hand. Is this for him? I couldn't deny it and nodded through my tears. So it's hardly platonic. You're dressing for sex. You have never offered me something so pleasant for him. Let's see. You always said that I should be enough of you without fancy makeup and lingerie, and that you should feel comfortable. So he gets more from you than I ever got. I couldn't think of how to respond, having no idea why I didn't do it for Mark. Perhaps because of the power or control in the marriage, or the fact that I am a wife and mother, not a lover. Do you think our whole marriage is boring or just our sex life? Are you doing things to him that you wouldn't do to me? It's not like that, Mark. I can't explain it. You're not boring in any way. I really couldn't explain it. Mark always wanted to be more sexually adventurous, but I held back and rejected what he suggested. That's the whole difference. It's comfortable with me, but he excites me. Now you are making an effort, but not for our sake. How much effort did you put into flirting and dinners? I didn't like the truth in his words. Now it seemed so smug and stupid, because if I had put in more effort, I might not have looked for another. There is not much difference between Mark and Samuel. The difference is in me and how I behave with them. Stuttering, I apologized and ran to the bedroom, locking the door. I expected Mark to knock her out and throw me out, but he didn't. This is a complete disaster, I called Samuel in a panic. He, making sure that I was safe, invited me to go to him. I decided that my life was now purgatory, and Samuel was my only way out. The next morning, I found Mark in the kitchen, sleeping in the spare room. I'm sorry, Mark. I ruined us and I can't fix it. I think we should try to break up. I need time to find myself, to understand what I need. Mark saw right through me. It's because of him, isn't it? You go to him. Have you been communicating with him all this time? I sighed. Yes, for quite a long time. I need to sort out my feelings for him and for you. For both of you. Yes, but you will figure this out in his bed, so the decision has already been made. Everything is wrong. I love you, but I ruined everything, and in fact I got confused in everything, in all emotions. I need to check if everything is real with him. Well, you can tell the children. I myself have no idea how to explain your actions. I'll tell them it's a short vacation. Don't be stupid. They'll be waiting for you to come back. But I really can come back. Mark looked at me incredulously. What makes you think that it depends on you? In any case, I want you to leave tomorrow and never come back. What about children and school? Seriously? You ruin our lives and decide that now this is what is important. That I, as usual, will come up with something, and you blame it on another fun thing. Go and find yourself. Most likely, you will find yourself in his bed. I was confused. It never occurred to me that Mark would snatch the decision out of my hands. In parting, he said, "Tell the truth to your family and friends, I won't lie for you." I left the next day. Packing was terrible. It felt wrong, like a mistake. But I had burned my bridges with Mark, and Samuel was so excited that I was coming to him. I looked around the house one last time. Mark is right. His idea was mine, and I love this house. But even if I get it back in the divorce, I ruined our happy home. I told the children that this was a trial separation, but it did not cause shock. They knew that something had happened. It was much more difficult to tell Mom and Dad. Mom just cried and asked me not to do it, but Dad could barely look at me, shaking his head. I went to Samuel's hotel. Usually, being with him made me feel better, but not this time. We stayed there for a couple of days before he asked me to leave. We returned to his yacht in Corfu for a couple of weeks. The sex was great, but I missed the kids and home. I didn't sleep well, and of course, felt guilty. I often wondered what Mark does and how he copes with everything. We made plans for my divorce. Samuel dealt with lawyers who contacted Mark, and we found a luxury apartment near the school that we could rent until the divorce and the house were resolved. I tried to call my friends, but they were not interested. Jane and Shona were still on shaky ground with their husbands and had no interest in getting to know Samuel or communicating. Shona summed it up. We will support Mark and the children, and if you are not in the group for a while, it will be better. I was furious. They are my lifelong friends, not Mark's. Laura, my best friend, was even worse. She couldn't come to terms with the fact that I left a man like Mark. I was very angry. When the kids mentioned the next barbecue at the neighbor's house, I insisted to Samuel that we go there because I had as much right to be there as Mark. When we arrived, everyone was already there, including Mark and the children. Jane immediately asked us to leave. What a friend you are. I broke up with Mark and not with everyone else. Jane did not waste time and answered sharply, Maybe, Kirsty, but do you really want to rub your family's nose in the fact that you abandoned them and now you've come here with your new boyfriend? Samuel tried to drag me away. Mark and most of the others just looked confused. Jake brought me to my senses. Just leave, Mom. You're upsetting Chloe. I turned in horror and saw Chloe crying, and then running into Mark's lap, burying her little face in his chest. Everyone else stared at me, and I let Samuel lead me away. I was so upset. I felt like I was losing everyone, not just Mark. Mark, she wasted no time and filed for divorce. I was worried that I would lose my children and friends. Jesus, I'll be one of those weekend dads, slowly losing touch with their kids, desperately trying to find something to entertain them, anything to get them into their dreary apartment. I've heard all these horror stories, and her new man has enough money to legally bury me and impress the kids. I was terrified to hear about the kids' first trip on his damn yacht. Thankfully, Tony and John turned out to be great friends, and to my surprise, Laura, Shona, and Jane were fantastic, helping with childcare, even coming with food and checking I was okay. The divorce went on as usual. Financially, everything looked as if everything could be easily divided in half, but the children became a stumbling block. Kirsty was expecting primary custody and the right to live with them in our home. They were happy to buy him from me. For her new man, money is not a problem. His lawyers were so arrogant that they expected me to accept what they gave me and still be grateful. Everything changed when my lawyer pointed out that Kirsty had effectively abandoned the children during her long holiday. Then she abandoned them again, sailing away with Samuel for several weeks on his yacht. Her lawyers tried to argue that she knew that the children were being cared for. My lawyer agreed, adding, they were definitely cared for by their primary caregiver and the only constant presence in their lives. Moreover, Jake insists that he wants to live with his father, and Chloe insists that she wants to stay with Jake. I didn't let the kids know about this, but I was very proud of the way Jake looked after Chloe during this whole sad process. I tried to protect them from the worst, but I couldn't protect them completely. They spent a lot of time with Tony and John's children, which was very beneficial for them. Tony's house has a granny annex where we often spent the night. The kids always had a great time. The routine and simplicity of close friends helped a lot. His lawyers must have been worried, because the next offer was joint custody. I thought about trying to get sole custody through the courts, but it was risky, and it would be better for the children if we could agree on a compromise. In the end, we agreed that the children would be with me for half the week. I would pick them up from Wednesday to Friday lunchtime and leave them with me for the weekend, if it was mine. I also insisted that each of us be able to attend school and sporting events with them. Kirsty was never interested in it, but I knew it would give me more access, and I liked being part of it. The stumbling block was the house. I refused their offer to buy out my part and insisted on selling it. I think Samuel was happy with it, but I knew it would upset Kirsty, which was a shame, No, really, honestly. I wasn't worried about where to live as Tony offered to let us use the annex for as long as we wanted for a minimal rent. The payment was much less than our previous mortgage, and I thought I could use the money for other needs until we decided on a permanent home. On the day we were supposed to sign the divorce papers, Kirsty came to see me. She was reminiscing about past times and how good we were together, and I assumed that wouldn't help either of us. Then, out of the blue, she said, "Maybe we shouldn't do this?" I lost my temper. "It was you who abandoned our marriage and rushed to get a divorce, but now you're not sure." "You are crazy?" "Maybe so. I left because I thought you would never forgive my actions. I made a mistake and just continued to dig an even deeper hole." "What's the matter? Isn't everything a bed of roses with a new man?" "He's not you, but I miss us and our life together." The thought of a happy life with Kirsty flashed before me, including everything we had planned and talked about. But it was unrealistic. She is not what I imagined her to be. Superficial. That's the word that popped into my head. "Just sign the papers and go, Kirsty." I went back to the pub to celebrate my divorce with the guys when John said, "We're happy to fight with you, but maybe we can do something more constructive. What do you want out of life? You know, from a broader perspective. The meaning of life and all that." For John, it was very profound. I had no idea, but it dawned on me that I could have options, ambitions, doing what I loved. Of course, the priority is the children, but perhaps I can do something more than just survive. On those days when the children were not with me, I had free time. I started cycling, jogging, and walking again, and started to feel better. Being left for another man was a huge blow to my self-esteem. Working out naturally led to some weight loss, which I enjoyed, and gave me some of my confidence back. Children have even started to take part in some of these activities. Shauna tried to get me to start dating, but I wasn't ready, and I definitely felt shy. I was afraid to start from scratch with someone new. Shauna and Jane often invited us to dinner with their families, and Laura brought us food every Thursday. The kids were grateful. I managed most things around the house, but cooking was something new to me, and yet I was getting better, little by little. I asked Jane why they were all so nice to me. After all, they were Kirsty's friends, not mine. She laughed. "The great thing about you, Mark, is that you have no idea how much people like you. You have always been there for us and our children without a second thought, and we just repay you." I was truly touched and blushed like an embarrassed teenager. I started organizing weekend trips with the kids, lots of sports and outdoor activities. They loved it, and so did I. We often went with other families and Laura. When Kirsty had children, I went on long hikes and trips and went to the mountains. I got interested again and got in touch with some old friends I used to climb with and got back into it too. It was great to meet them again. We immediately went back to the old friendship that I missed when marriage and children came along. Living in the annex meant I had less to do with renovations, and I even had some extra money to spare. I saved it up and took the kids on a trip to the Andes in the summer, including a trip to Machu Picchu. They really enjoyed it, and we started planning our next trip, possibly to the Alps. My climbing buddies were looking at options there too. Things got a little weird after that. I was sure Laura was starting to flirt with me a little, and Kirsty was getting more and more close to me every time the kids were handed over. Kirsty. The kids called from vacation and were so excited that Jake even overcame his usual teenage shyness. I saw a photo of Mark on social networks where he and his children were in Machu Picchu. When I looked through the children's pages, there were hundreds of photographs of amazing places, swimming, flying, and adventures. I wondered if I was the one who stopped him from doing all this before, because now his life seemed not boring at all. Mark's pages included some scary rock climbing photos with faces I vaguely recognized from our wedding day. But the worst of all were the photos from camping trips and barbecues with Jane, Shauna, and Laura and their families. I couldn't understand my feelings until I realized that it was jealousy, which seemed inexplicable, because I was the one who gave up such a life. When I suggested that the children spend their vacation on a yacht, they did not show much interest. Still couldn't find contact with Samuel. I asked what kind of vacation they liked, and they answered that it was better with Dad because he does what needs to be done. I suggested that we go to Disney with them. At least they were happy about that. But I don't think Samuel was very happy. Living with someone is completely different than dating every now and then. Once the novelty wore off, I realized that Samuel looked a lot like my ex-husband. He's cute, but no better than Mark. They are both essentially good people. Samuel had difficulty adjusting to life with children and the amount of time it took up. We couldn't just pick up and go on a trip at any moment, leaving them behind. And they were not at all interested in city trips, elegant restaurants, and hotels that Samuel was used to. He tried very hard, but began to resent that he had to adjust everything to my old life. I missed my friends and family. I missed Mark. I thought about him often, remembering the quiet comfort of each other's company. What was missing was just having him around, my best friend, who always gave great advice and always found a way to make everything better. My intuition told me that Mark was the one I truly loved, the person who carried me through the difficult periods of my life. It was a terrible time right now, but Mark wasn't there to help me. I threw it away. This realization was quickly followed by tears. I went to drop off the kids, and Laura was there. I was glad to see her. Out of everyone, she was my closest friend. But we hadn't talked for so long. The children ran inside. Laura said she had dropped off food, and I thanked her for helping Mark with the kids, saying she was a good friend. She joked that he had always been a terrible cook. We asked each other how things were going and responded politely. I saw her hesitate before saying, "I don't understand why you did this. I was always protective of you until Mark came along, but together you guys were perfect. Then children made you complete, and I was so jealous that you had everything I always dreamed of, and then you threw it away." I had a hard time finding what to answer. I don't know. I got confused, got caught up in something, and couldn't get out until I realized I was in too deep. "Well, I hope your loss is to my benefit." "What do you mean?" "I always joked that if I had seen it before you, I would have taken it for myself." "Well, I'm serious. We always got along and had fun. He's still in pain, but I'll help him get back." "You mean you and Mark?" "Of course, if he accepts me. He's so much better than any of my previous boyfriends. You're crazy to kick him out." But you can't." I can and will do it. Next weekend we are going camping. Look, it's better for all of us. We are friends, and we can deal with the children among ourselves. It will be much easier than an evil stepmother who will scold you at every opportunity. I felt tears of disappointment and jealousy in my eyes as I watched Laura leave. Did she really take the first step so quickly? I wiped my eyes and entered the annex. The kids ran to their rooms, no doubt immersed in their phones or laptops. I smiled. Mark was in the kitchen, trying to heat up Laura's food. He looked fit, handsome, and was completely discouraged by the microwave. I asked if we could talk. He looked slightly puzzled, but nodded towards the table. "Mark, what would you advise a friend if he made the biggest mistake in his life and didn't see how to correct it?" "It's hard to say without knowing what the mistake is." "Isn't it obvious?" He shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry about all this. I want to go back." He looked truly shocked. "To be honest, Kirsty, you did me a favor. Doing everything for you and our marriage, I lost myself. Now I like my life, traveling, communicating with children and friends. I worked to provide for our family, and now I started doing what I love, and this is just the beginning. Anything is possible. You said you needed to find yourself. Well, I guess that's what I did. I found something, maybe myself. But what if you had it all, and someone special to share it with? Does Samuel know about your sudden change of heart?" I shook my head. "So you're still hedging your bets." "I thought I was too boring for you. Has the excitement gone with him?" "I never said that, and now you're making fun of it. If there's one thing I regret, it's holding you back and not giving you everything. That passion for life that you have shines through. I'll beg you if it helps." Mark took a deep breath. "No, it won't help. The consequences for the children and for me are too strong. I realized that I don't know you, and I can never trust you again. For the sake of children, we can be polite, but no more. I tried to leave before the tears turned into a stream. Despite all my efforts, I was upset again when I returned to the apartment. Samuel saw how upset I was and asked what happened. All I could say through my tears was, "Mark." If I expected consolation, I was sorely mistaken. Samuel looked through me. "You still love him, don't you?" I couldn't think of what to answer, barely holding back tears. Samuel took his coat off the hanger and quietly left. He returned a few days later, but only to pick up his things. He never returned, and I never tried to contact him. Before I had a chance to try to contact Mark again, it became clear that he and Laura were a couple. Every time I dropped the kids off, she was there, and I have never seen her happier. Mark looked at her the same way he used to look at me. He and the kids revolved around her. I couldn't even hate her. She's a wonderful person, and they made a great couple. I tried my best to be happy for them, but again, I fell into despair. It seemed to me that Laura was stealing my life. The apartment lease expired, and I moved back to my mother, if we talk about life in the past. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was living the life I dreamed of with my best friend, and I watched it all from the front row. I am alone in this world and feel completely lost. That girl's night out, the decision to go on a date, being talked into going to a party, the extra drink, the conversation with Samuel, any of 100 small decisions could have prevented all of this. I can blame 1,000,000 decisions, but each of them was my own. I am to blame for everything. Mark. So, betrayed by my wife and expecting the worst, in the end, everything turned out just fine for me. Why did this not become the disaster that is written about in the literature? It was my good friends and family who supported me that made the difference. I was amazed at how well the children handled the situation. I hope we instilled good values in them that will help them get through life's ups and downs. I was lucky to have Laura, but she insists otherwise, describing us as the crown of her fairy tale. I also found something in myself, a quiet strength, to remember who I was, and it wasn't dependent on another person's opinions or actions. I also managed not to hate Kirsty, at least not for long. Of course, I didn't like her for a while, but even if that feeling passed, revenge would ultimately hurt me or the children. Laura is sure that I received the ultimate revenge, a life well lived. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.